The rain had already soaked through every layer of her worn-out sweater by the time the last bus of the evening pulled away, leaving behind nothing but the hiss of wet tires and the echo of people hurrying toward warm homes. She sat alone on the cold metal bench, hugging an old backpack that contained everything she still owned in the world. Most people walked past without looking at her. A few stared for a second before quickly turning away. She had become invisible to the city long ago, another forgotten face blending into the background of busy lives. But on this ordinary, rainy evening, something impossible was about to happen. 3 tiny voices would speak words so unexpected that they would change not only her future but the future of an entire family. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't arrive with wealth, power, or perfect timing. Sometimes they begin with the smallest act of kindness from the purest hearts. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can change lives, that everyone deserves a second chance, and that love is stronger than appearances, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in hope, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks. Your support helps us bring more heartwarming stories that remind the world compassion still exists. Her name was Grace, and only 5 years earlier, no one could have imagined she would end up sleeping on bus benches and under bridges. She had once lived in a small apartment filled with laughter, fresh flowers on the kitchen table, and photographs that captured birthdays, family dinners, and quiet evenings. She had worked as a pediatric nurse, spending every day comforting frightened children with gentle smiles and reassuring words. The work was demanding, but it gave her purpose. Every child who left the hospital healthy felt like another reminder that life was worth fighting for. Then life began taking pieces from her one by one. Her mother became seriously ill, requiring expensive treatments that insurance refused to cover. Grace emptied her savings without hesitation because family meant everything to her. She worked longer shifts, accepted overtime whenever possible, and sacrificed sleep just to keep up with the growing medical bills. Even then, it wasn't enough. When her mother finally passed away, Grace found herself carrying not only overwhelming grief but also crushing debt that seemed impossible to escape. The sadness affected every part of her life. She became exhausted, distracted, and emotionally drained. Small mistakes at work turned into larger concerns. Eventually, after missing several shifts while struggling with anxiety and depression, she lost the job she loved so deeply. Losing her income meant she quickly fell behind on rent. Friends who had once promised they would always be there slowly disappeared as months passed. Phone calls stopped. Invitations ended. Everyone seemed to have reasons why they couldn't help. Within a year, she packed what little remained into one faded backpack and walked away from the apartment that had once felt like home. Since then, every day had become a battle against hunger, loneliness, and hopelessness. Grace never begged. She couldn't bring herself to ask strangers for money. Instead, she collected recyclable bottles, helped clean small shops whenever owners needed temporary help, and occasionally earned enough to buy a simple meal. Some nights she ate. Some nights she simply drank water and hoped tomorrow would be kinder. Despite everything, one part of her heart refused to harden. Whenever she saw children laughing in parks, she smiled. Whenever someone dropped groceries, she rushed to help. If another homeless person was colder than she was, Grace often gave away her only blanket without thinking twice. She understood suffering better than most people ever would, and somehow that understanding made her even kinder instead of bitter. That rainy evening she sat silently at the bus stop, staring at puddles reflecting the streetlights. Her stomach ached with hunger. Her shoes had holes that let icy water seep inside with every step. She closed her eyes, wondering how much longer she could keep believing tomorrow might be different. She didn't notice the black SUV until it stopped nearby. A tall man stepped out holding 3 tiny umbrellas while trying to keep pace with 3 energetic little children who seemed determined to splash through every puddle they could find. They couldn't have been older than 5. Each child wore colorful rain boots, matching blue jackets, and knitted hats that barely stayed on their heads because they kept laughing and running in circles. The man looked exhausted. Even from across the sidewalk, Grace could see the heavy shadows beneath his eyes. His smile appeared only when the children looked at him, disappearing the moment they turned away. It was the smile of someone trying very hard to stay strong. He was clearly struggling to control all three children at once. One wanted to chase pigeons despite the rain. Another insisted on jumping into the biggest puddles. The third stopped suddenly after noticing Grace sitting quietly on the bench. Children often noticed what adults ignored. The little girl tugged gently on the man's sleeve before pointing toward Grace. The father looked embarrassed. He quietly encouraged his daughter to continue walking, assuming she had merely become curious about the stranger. But children don't always listen when their hearts speak louder than instructions. Within seconds, all three triplets stood in front of Grace, staring at her with innocent eyes that carried no judgment. They noticed her wet clothes. They noticed her tired smile. They noticed she was shivering. Most importantly, they noticed she was alone. Grace looked away, worried she might frighten them. She had grown used to adults pulling children aside whenever she came near. She expected the father to apologize and quickly lead them away. Instead, something unexpected happened. The smallest boy slowly removed his own tiny wool scarf. Without hesitation, he reached forward and carefully placed it into Grace's trembling hands. She froze. No one had given her anything in months. Not because they expected something in return. Not because they pitied her. Simply because they wanted to help. Grace felt tears filling her eyes before she even realized she was crying. The father rushed over, apologizing repeatedly while trying to return the scarf to his son. But the boy shook his head firmly. He wanted Grace to keep it. The father looked deeply embarrassed yet strangely emotional. He quietly admitted that his children had always insisted on helping anyone who looked lonely. Grace thanked them with a voice barely louder than a whisper. She wrapped the little scarf around her neck, feeling warmth that came from far more than wool. As the father gently encouraged the children toward the parking lot, something extraordinary happened. The three little faces turned back together. They looked at Grace with complete sincerity. Then one child spoke softly. "You need a home." Another continued. "And we need a mommy." Time seemed to stop. The rain. The traffic. Even the sounds of the city faded into silence. Grace stared in disbelief, convinced she had misunderstood. The father stood frozen several feet away, his face filled with shock. He clearly hadn't expected those words. Neither had anyone else. For several long seconds, nobody moved. The little triplets simply smiled with innocent certainty, unaware that a single sentence had just reached into two broken lives at exactly the moment both had almost given up hope.